Reality shows are television's sewer, filled with self-centered, narcissistic jerks who think the world revolves around them and who think their every bowel movement should be primetime TV. But in all the sewage, we got a family of rednecks who, besides being good role models, were also funny, nice, and wonder of wonders, actually good people. And at the very end of every show, in this current godless age, they always ended with a prayer. It's funny that a group of long-haired, shaggy-bearded guys who look like hippies who went off into the woods and never came back would be the symbol of traditional, old-fashioned God-fearing America, but that's exactly what happened. People who would usually condemn those who look like a bunch of unkempt hippies instead tuned in every night in record numbers to watch them and wore their shirts everywhere. It was nice to see a family that actually, despite all their teasing, loved each other and didn't just curse and scream at each other every episode. The show was deceptively simple. The guys would sit around the shop doing everything they could to avoid actual work, all the while torturing each other with good-natured but venomous insults. They would make fun of Willie for being fat and bossy. Willie would understandably criticize everyone for being lazy and doing nothing but running their mouths all day. They would resolve their differences and pray at the end. But there was more to it beneath the surface. Here's the colorful cast of characters. Phil was the voice of reason and the guy who started the company itself. He has always been my favorite character, and he has a really interesting life. He started as a dirt poor kid who didn't even have electricity in his home, who was actually so good as a football player that he was approached to play professionally, and even made future football star Terry Bradshaw his second-string quarterback. But always the redneck, football conflicted with his hunting, so he quit. He then spent several years drinking and cheating on his wife before he found God and got sober. Check out the solid movie The Blind to get more detail on Phil and Kay's love story. He then got an idea and decided to make a new duck call to make it easier to hunt ducks. And then he became a millionaire businessman, a true prototype of the American dream, all the while never quitting his simple lifestyle. Seriously, he and Miss Kay could live in luxury with fancy houses and cars. Instead, they live in the exact same house they always have and lived like the rest of us peasants. He's known for calling everybody yuppies and for his blunt, no-nonsense, tell-it-like-it-is wisdom, all the while also having a dry black sense of humor. Phil was basically retired during the show, and his son Willie was the real boss of the organization. He was the only member who actually had any business sense and work ethic at all, and he was on a never-ending quest to get his lazy family members to actually work. All the while, they made fun of him for being chubby. Willie was the main character, but Crazy Uncle Si was the show's star. He was the trademark crazy uncle and was a great archetype of the lovable know-it-all who knew nothing, a tradition that goes back to Barney Fife and Tim the Toolman. A trait that is usually annoying and unlikable, but somehow with these characters became lovable instead. He was rarely right, but he was never in doubt. He had no command of the English language and was borderline incoherent at times, but he was by far the funniest character, with his irrational love of tea, his long naps in the middle of work time, and his constant desire to avoid work at all costs. Jase is the only character I don't like at all. To me, he's a rude smart aleck. The fact that he reminds me of someone I know personally who I can't stand doesn't help me like him any better either. Poor Jep was underrated for being the most normal of the crew. He was always tortured for the unforgivable sin of being a younger brother, and he was often overlooked despite being every bit as talented as the rest. He got the last laugh though, since his wife is by far the hottest in the show. There's other characters too, like Miss Kay, the standard sweet grandma, Willie's good-looking wife Corey, his even more good-looking daughter Sadie, and of course, neighbor Mountain Man, who spoke like this all the time. Seriously, you could recite a whole Shakespeare play in the time it takes for him to say a full sentence. The last few seasons weren't near as good because Phil was basically retired from the show. He was never particularly into the idea of the show anyway, and openly thought reality TV was stupid, and he was never comfortable with fame. When he got suspended by A&E for a politically incorrect statement, He basically told the channel to go stuff it. The show was never as good without him. He was the one sane man in the lunatic asylum, but the show stayed good throughout regardless. Sadly, after the show ended, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and recently died, which is why I'm making this video in his honor. Bottom line, this show was a hoot, and I named many of my pets after the show's characters. If you're a city slicker who thinks that they can stop cows from farting and burst into tears every time you see a cross, you'll hate this show and consider the characters ignorant white trash. But if you're a country boy like me, you see a bunch of colorful but lovable characters who, despite their simple lifestyles, knew more about how to live life than anyone else did. And a lot of us, myself included, know a lot of people who remind us of these classic characters, especially if you live in the country.